Hello, everyone, and welcome to enVision Together, going to our next level of best. Today, I am pleased to welcome Dana Diaz to our show. She has wonderful things to share with us, and I won't go into those details right now. We'll go ahead and have her introduce herself in her own way. So, welcome, Dana.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I am Dana Diaz. I am an author and a mom and a cat mom and just a regular person sitting in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, basically speaking out for other victims of abuse. Being a victim in a few different strategies to create the awareness about it, because there's so many misconceptions about abuse and narcissism, and there's such a complex healing process that comes after somebody survives abuse and domestic violence as well. So I'm here to bring some light to that, and hopefully not too many people will be able to relate, but if they can, I want to give them hope that there is definitely a much better life beyond the circumstances that they're in.
That's great. Thank you. And that's why we wanted you to be a guest on our show, because we're all about helping each other go to our next level of best around whatever
Yes.
topic or issue, whether it's abuse or success. So, and I think this conversation will have a bit of both.
Yes.
So it makes it really great to have you on the show. So I know from a previous conversation that you were kind of rejected by your peers as a young person. You said that your parents didn't even want their kids, other parents didn't want their kids to play with. I mean, I hesitate to even say the word, but it's the B word, a
I
bastard.
know.
Um,
Yeah.
how did you make sense of your situation and get through the loneliness in that time of your life?
It was a tough one, and I hope nobody's offended by the language that I am going to use, because I'm just going to say what it is. But they have to remember this was the 70s. We were still trying to find equality and a little more humanity among society. But I had been born to a teenage mother, and back then it was not okay to have a child out of wedlock and so young. So she didn't even really want me, so I was facing this kind of detachment from her emotionally at home, which was hard enough. And then when she got married, her husband was just really unpleasant, to say the least. He was, I didn't know what a narcissist was back then, but just very arrogant and felt he was superior. And as such, he sought to control us and create this, family out of a family that didn't really exist, because outwardly we were supposed to pretend we were a biological family, but then in the house I was told, you're not my biological daughter, you shouldn't even be here, I shouldn't even have to pay for you. So then I'm going to school, and yes, the kids are saying, well, because their parents have heard these things, rumors start in communities, and they're saying, we can't play with you, you're the bastard child, you're illegitimate, all these things. Even the teachers would be like, oh, of course you're the kid that has lice, you're the one. So I was always kind of put in this little box where I was different from everyone else. And I was tough, I was fiery and strong-willed. I stood up for myself, but I was a tiny little peanut of a thing that nobody really took seriously. So, as tough as I felt and as strongly as I felt, nobody was hearing me. So, yeah, I absolutely was internalizing these feelings of insignificance and unworthiness. And I absolutely felt like I was less than, because that was what was the narrative all around me.
Right.
So I had no other idea that I was anything but that.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. But I'm equally sorry that that type of story is actually becoming more common than
Yeah,
not. It's so sad, the
exactly.
degree of abuse, whether it's emotional or physical or even sexual physical,
Yeah.
um, it's really rampant in this day and time. And So my heart goes out to you. And I know something of abuse myself, as you probably know.
Yeah,
But thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being transparent about that. The name calling, the labels. And
exactly.
what's sad to me about that is it happens at an age when we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to store it.
Right.
So 9 times out of 10, we're storing it in an improper place, and we it lodges into our souls because we haven't matured and become sophisticated enough to know that that's really the expression of somebody else's problem, not you.
Exactly. Exactly. I didn't realize that honestly until my mid 40s, sadly, because I think, even though I was physically abused as well by my stepfather, well, and my mother participated in that a lot too, but that I could get up and kind of shake it off. But those words, I mean, they were like daggers in my heart because, I was also born and raised in the church. So I was struggling even as a child. We went to mass every morning. I went to a private Catholic school. And so I'm trying to negotiate in my head, like, why did God put me here if I'm being told I wasn't meant to be here and I wasn't wanted here? Like, what is my purpose? Is my purpose really just to suffer? Is so I mean, it wasn't just trying to fit in among my, the kids, among my peers and fit into a family, but I'm trying to fit into this world and having like these existential thoughts, as a young child. And that's a lot. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming. But definitely, I think it brings to light also the idea of, belonging. I mean, as humans, we want connection. We want to fit
Yeah.
somewhere. We want our tribe. We want those people that back us up. That's supposed to be your mother. I
Yeah.
mean, I've always said, like, even serial killers, I mean, they have their mothers sitting behind them in court saying, yeah, he screwed up or she screwed up, but that's my kid and I love him and I'm here for him. And I couldn't even get
I never
that.
really thought about it like that, but yeah, they're
Your
sitting.
mom is supposed to be there for you. She's supposed
Wow.
to be that one person for real. And it was hard because, like I said, then I'm wondering, like, well, how does God feel about me then? If my own mother can reject me, how does God feel?
Yeah.
And there was this one little girl I met in second grade, and God love her, I will never forget her ever in my entire life. She showed kindness to me where other kids did not. She did it a little kind of under the radar because she didn't want to be picked on like I was.
Um,
But one day I'll never forget, some kids, were bullying me on the playground. And again, back then, this was a time where I hate to say, but bullying wasn't considered a bad thing. It didn't have the stigma.
true.
Teachers would stand out there with their cigarettes, hanging out, chatting amongst themselves while you were having scuffles here and there. And
Wow.
it just was how it was. So I had been just bullied and roughed up a little on the playground just for being me, which I was starting to get used to, unfortunately. And this little girl, when I went in, she helped me wash myself off in the bathroom before class, clean up my scraped up knees and some of my, scrapes on my elbows and everything. And she held my hand. And when we got to class, she had a gold chain with a Virgin Mary on it. And I said, I can't. She said, I want you to have it. I said, I can't take that from you. And she says, no, you need it more than I do. And I mean, it was in second grade. I mean, what were we, 6 years old? But she had this foresight and this beautiful, considerate heart to see me for who I was. So it gave me a little bit of a glimmer of hope, and I think there are people throughout our lives that make these little pop-ins here and there that give you that courage to just keep going another day, and that whatever it is, you'll get through it again, and so just things like that kept me going as a kid, and I certainly
Oh,
had
that's
the vision though that as soon as I could get out of that house, I needed to go be on my own.
wow, that's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that as well.
Yeah.
But you touched on something a while back that really stood out to me, and it was the way you described the emotional, mental stress and de-stress, or distress.
Yes.
as being more painful perhaps than the physical
Yeah.
pain. And I can relate to that in the sense that um, there's times when I've been really like, I have a problem with my back and it's really, really
Okay.
painful. And I mean, really painful. It was so painful in my 20s that I was put on disability.
Oh
Thank
my
God it got
goodness.
better and I, didn't stay in that situation, but it was pretty bad. But then I faced things in life where it was more of an emotional, mental struggle.
Yeah.
And I've often said, I don't know which pain is worse.
You
And it
know,
made me think of that.
yeah, and I mean, I've gotten some flack from people for saying that because believe me, I know that as rough as things had gotten, and I had a couple situations in that house that were awful. And
Yeah.
one I honestly thought I was going to die that night. But so many people have had it so severe that I mean, it causes the emotional and psychological trauma. But my feeling about it when I am saying that from my experience
Mhm.
is that physical pain can be fixed.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a problem, you can have a surgery, you can get a prescription medication, hopefully to alleviate the pain. But words,
Yeah.
ooh, they really affect you so deeply, and there's nothing that you can do um in that moment or in the time that it's affecting you. It takes so much more work to undo
Mhm.
the trauma that a small
Yeah.
phrase or a few words causes you. And it, like I said, 4 decades of my life I struggled with the words that were spoken to me.
You know what? I want to stand with you and validate you. Not that you need to be validated or affirmed by me, but I know something of what you're talking about, and I'm not afraid to say it too. Um, I've had physical abuse, sexual physical abuse, and
Mhm.
I've had the mental, emotional consequences that stem from that act.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the act itself is horrible. And if we were to watch a movie displaying that, we would be horrified. But what we
Yeah.
forget is that event is over, but the event is not over here in the
No,
mind
it's
and
not.
in the soul. So it does take many, many, many years to unravel um, abuses of any kind. So
Yes.
um, I don't think we should be afraid to say that. It's a different kind of pain. It's a lingering pain. It's a pain that actually can take control of your life. Um,
Yes. It
so
affects every aspect of your life. It affects all of your relationships. It affects your work. It affects sometimes your ability to function
your
if something really
confidence,
triggers you. Yes,
you show up in the
absolutely.
world differently because of it. So though
Yes.
it's stemming from a physical event, the consequences of that physical event outlives and I dare say outweighs the event itself
Yeah,
in so
I
many
agree.
ways.
I
So
agree. But I think what you said is really important that, you know, it, where was I going with this? Just that when the things are happening to you, like you said, it's really bad. But I think we take these words that are spoken to us or take the trauma of it and we think that we're defective. And I don't like this verbiage that people use when they say they're broken or they're damaged. Because if I needed knee surgery or if I broke my arm, yeah, the arm's broken, but it doesn't mean I'm broken.
yeah,
And I just look at that physical injury the same as I look at a mental injury. People don't realize that, things like bullying, verbal abuse, any kind of emotional or psychological trauma, so to speak, is actually causing an injury to your brain.
mm-hmm.
So you, me, anyone else that has ever suffered something like that, we're not broken. We're not damaged. We had an injury.
Mhm.
except this injury is going to take, just like you go to rehab, to learn to walk again or learn to use, some aspect of your body again. You have to sort of go through this mindful therapy and this healing process
And
to
it's
get to
hard
a
to
point where you can
pinpoint.
rehabilitate your thoughts.
Yeah, it's hard to even pinpoint what the issue actually is. So it's harder to mend because you have to first just peel back. How it affected you might not be how it affected me. The space
Exactly.
you locked it away in may not be the same space I locked it in. So it's a whole guessing game of
Yes.
where is the root cause of this? Because once you find the root, then you can uproot it. But it's the whole trick of all of
Exactly.
these vines that spread all over the place, trying to find, okay, where did it originate? Where did it?
For real. And that's what the healing journey feels
Yeah.
like when you get into it, because I think people have this idea that you're just going to like wake up one day and while you slept the night before, some fairy came and sprinkled magical dust on you, and you're going to wake up and say, "Oh, I'm healed. Life is happy," and skip around and smile. And it's not that way. What you said is very poignant because it is, you are digging. You are, when you decide to heal, it's like I remember once trying to dig up a rose bush that I didn't want where it was, and it had been there for years. And Lord help me, if anyone has ever dug up a rose bush, I couldn't get that sucker out for anything. I'm digging and I'm digging. Like you said, I am trying to find the end of that root. And it just kept going and going. And that's what healing feels like, because you start with like, okay, this thing hurt me, or these words hurt me. Well, why did they hurt me? And then you go
Yeah.
to the next thing. Well,
Why did that
at the
hurt me?
core of my being, I have this, abandonment trauma or this
Right.
rejection trauma or whatever it is. And then you're going the next step, you're digging, you're digging, you're digging to find out. But in that, you're exposing so much about yourself, about the person who did this to you, about life in
Right.
general. And it's
I like,
exhausting. You have conflicting thoughts in your head. You're trying to make sense of everything. So it's
yeah.
very difficult. But if you can get there, it's also very, it opens your eyes to everything too. And I think once we can find the understanding about the situation, we can accept it. And at that point, learn to forgive ourselves for carrying some, like you had said in the beginning, that struck me to the core, because that's what healing is about. Is I think when people abuse you, they are projecting their trauma, their issues, whatever their unhealed situation is, onto
it's
you.
like,
And once we can release that back, it's so liberating.
it's true. It's like they put this poison seed into
Mm-hmm.
your fertile ground, so to speak.
Yes.
Then I like the analogy, and that's why I'm staying with it, of roots and plants, because
Yes.
there's so many networks of vines and roots, and it gets confusing. And if this happens to you as a child before you are in a better position, because even if it happens to you as an adult, it's hard to figure out. But when it happens to you as a child, you don't have that sophistication to even pinpoint what exactly is hurting you, disturbing you, what triggers are going off in you.
Right.
So when you're looking for that exact root that has to come out of the ground to make it all stop so the whole thing dies, you're going through a process of, is this vine it? Is this track it? Is this root, this part of the stem or the root it? And what you find is the original root, if you will, it's spread in so many different directions. And to me, it goes back to what we said earlier. Um, you may be pricked or hurt in one area, but it spreads now into your whole life in multiple areas. And
Yes.
I'm reacting like this. Why are you so angry? Okay, I'm angry. That's a problem. I need to change it. I need to get it together. But that's still not the root. You have low self
Right.
esteem. Why don't you believe in yourself more? Okay, that's right. I do have low self esteem, and I that's a problem, and I need to work on it, but it's still not the root. So it's like getting to oh my God, it's this overarching thing that all these other things have grown out of. And I think that's what
Yeah, and
people
it
don't
keeps
understand.
growing. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
keeps growing too. I mean, for me personally, I mean, obviously had a continued relationship. It was more distant, and we became estranged a few times, but every time I was around them, I mean, we'll
Are you
keep
talking
going with
about your
this
parents?
analogy. Yeah, my mother and stepfather, it just kept growing and growing because even though I was old enough that they knew if they touched me, I was calling the cops,
Hmm.
that verbal stuff, still making the remarks, still feeding my mind with thoughts that I'm incompetent, incapable, that I'm never gonna amount to anything, and that I don't matter, and nothing I say matter. You know, it just kept festering in me. It kept feeding, that's why I couldn't heal, and I couldn't let it go. Even despite trying to go to therapy throughout my adult life, it was still there because it was still in progress, so to speak. The abuse was still happening. So it wasn't until, it was them that they started the silent treatment again, because they used that usually to disapprove of things that I said or did. But during the spell of silent treatment back in 2019, I just finally said, you know what? Either you people want to be my parents or you don't. You have not expressed to me in any way throughout my life that you have, but I would like to have some relationship with you, but I don't want it to be like this. I would like something kind, courteous, respectful,
Right.
and they weren't willing. They wanted to say that I was mentally unstable and that I was the problem. I'm the
Let
ultimate
me ask you
scapegoat.
this though.
So
Let
it
me,
just ended badly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm a writer, and when we're writing characters, art imitates real life. So one of the things
Yes.
we consider is that no human being is all bad and no
Correct.
human being is all good. So if you're the good fairy godmother, there's something wrong with you. Something's going on with you where you're not perfect. And if you're the evil devil in the story, there's some redeeming qualities. There's something about you that would be
Right.
likable. Um, so the man who goes home and abuses his family, when he goes to work, he's very humorous. He keeps everybody laughing. He's upbeat.
Mhm.
That's a redeeming quality, even though he's
Yeah.
doing this terrible thing at home. So, what was like that in terms of your parents? What was the good that you experienced?
I'll be honest with you. I have the good memories that I have with my mother. The only times I ever felt close to her, as simple as as this sounds, was whenever we were driving somewhere. We could just be going to the grocery store, or she could be driving me to a dance class, and she loved playing the oldies station.
Mm.
And when she would play the oldies, she would sing along and I would sing along, and we would just laugh and belt these songs out, even though neither one of us could sing worth a damn. But I just, I loved that. That's when I felt close to her.
Mm.
And it's so hard. It's so hard for people that don't understand. I don't even know how to make you understand how, you came out of somebody's womb and they just refuse to embrace this connection and to embrace that love that's between you. It's very difficult, but yeah, we had all these moments in the car growing up, and even through my teenage years, and even despite everything that was happening. And to this day, I have a hard time. As a matter of fact, just last week, my husband and I were driving somewhere, and he was changing the stations, and an oldie came on, and it actually brought me to tears because I thought of my mother, and I wished we could have just even an iota of that in our life, but she doesn't want anything to do with me, and it's very sad.
But you do have
But my
those moments?
Father, unfortunately, he was that. I do have those moments. I do hold those memories, in my heart. But, unfortunately, I've always said, similarly to you, good people do bad things and bad people do good things. And you're absolutely right. As a writer, I mean, even when I was writing my book, even though it's nonfiction and it's about my previous marriage, which was abusive, when the publisher came to me and said, okay, boo-hoo, we've already seen and heard and read the story of, the big bad man who's mean to his wife. She's like, you had a part. You weren't perfect. Your halo's a little crooked. And she was right. And so I had to, acknowledge those parts of me and those things that I did that weren't necessarily characteristic of me, but apparently they were, because I did and said them. And that, definitely impacts the dynamic between two people. But at the end of the day, my stance is that if you are intentionally harming another human being in some way, that is just cruel and it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think any of us are going to argue against that. I just, I guess I don't like to just look at, people. I like to look at people in a holistic way.
Mm-hmm.
I would never want anyone to judge me solely off of my mistake,
Agreed.
solely off of whatever. I'm a whole person, even the parts of me that's a total screw up.
Agreed. And that, you know what? I love that. And you're 100% right. And I think that's one of the things that I like to, let people know, especially when they are, in the position that I used to be in, where they think that there's something so wrong with them. And it's, they're just really internalizing everything that's going on around them, like it's their fault. And I'm like, no, you have good things about you. Are you perfect? No, but
Right.
None of us are. And
But
we have
another
all done
reason
and said
why
things.
I brought it up is it also gets confusing when you experience the good from the same person who's doing something so horrible.
Yes.
That's a confusing place, because it's like, I love you, but the person I love is also hurting me. That's harder. That's
Yes.
A lot of confusion for a young person, for an adult person. You get confused about what love looks like, what
Absolutely.
good looks like. What does it mean to, I mean, you get all these unhealthy concepts, but then it leads and plays a role in how you live your life, which is leading me to my next question. You had this childhood abuse, and then you found yourself as an adult in an abusive situation. So
Yes.
let's transition there and tell me a little bit about your narcissistic relationship that you were in, the man that you were married.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with what you just said. Basically he walked into where I worked one day. I'm 19 years old. I'm in college. I'm working full time. I'm a fighter. I was going to make my way through life without my mother and stepfather. I was just very determined to lead a different life because I knew that I deserved better than what I was given in my childhood. So I'm working one day, 19 years old. This young man walks in my office. He was just very arrogant and he seemed very entitled, thought he was better than everybody. And I just didn't like him at all. He reminded me of my stepfather. I'm like, I know this personality. I'm not feeding into it. I'm not going there. Well, I was also, having come out of this childhood where I was starved of love, I also felt like I was like a little puppy waiting for a treat, and if anyone imagines a puppy wagging its tail, like almost shaking, like, just give me the treat, give me the treat. So when he expressed an interest in me, I thought, okay, maybe I need to, give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? I don't like him. Fine. But what if I do? What if he's not what he presents like? And yeah, we went into this 25-year, relationship. We got married, had a kid, because what you had said about, yeah, he's good and he's bad. Obviously, nobody is attracted to some weirdo running down the street with a butcher knife like Chucky. These are nicely dressed, very well-mannered people. His family was lovely. His sister was very welcoming, after a while. And it was like the Beaver Cleaver show. It just didn't make sense to me that he was this other personality sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it was this constant push and pull where there was great love, or seemed to be, and a lot of affection. We laughed, we had all these good times, but then he'd have these angry outbursts, and he would accuse me of things and blame me for things I had no part of. And it sort of repeated that same cycle that I felt in my childhood, but it was familiar to me. Yeah, it was familiar to me. So I don't want to say I was
attracted as a husband, someone like your father.
Yeah, they say you marry your father, or if you're in the male role, you marry your mother, whatever it is. But I absolutely did that. And it creates, what we call in narcissistic language, this trauma bond, because things got worse and worse, and that's what narcissists, well, I think a lot of abusers, regardless of whether they're narcissists, they push the bounds just a little more every time because they know they got away with that. So next time it's going to be a little worse. They're going to do a little more to affect you. And it keeps going and going.
Can you define it a little more for us? You often say narcissistic abuse. I'm not necessarily used to hearing it together like that. What does that mean?
Sure. And narcissistic abuse is simply when a narcissist abuses you. And a narcissist on a very basic level is somebody that actually does think that they should be admired and praised and exalted because they do feel that they are superior to everybody else. Rules don't apply to them. They sometimes even delude themselves about their status and their position, but they generally feel like they deserve more than the average person. Entitled to the point, to a very dangerous point, though. And they will use, if they're abusive, they're using the abuses to gain that fulfillment for their ego. Mm-hmm. Not all narcissists are abusive, but the narcissists that are, and the reason why narcissistic abuse is so traumatic for the victims is because it's not just verbal or physical. There is sexual, there's financial abuse, there's legal abuse, there's the gaslighting that, they will employ any tactic that they can to maintain control over you and make sure that you don't leave, because they are, getting what they need from you, and they can't risk you going out and revealing who they really are, because that's what you had said as well, is that, yes, these people are out in society going to work and everybody loves them and they'll do anything for anybody. And they go to the family events and, the kids love them and are climbing all over them. They're making grandpa laugh. And, these are seemingly decent, good people, but then they have that person that they're abusing that sees this other side, and it's a very nasty, ugly side. And so it's hard to, the conflicting persona is hard for the victim to kind of decipher as to what is.
Break it down in a slightly different way. So can you think of a specific act or word, deed, thought, well, not a thought, that your abusive husband would do or say, and then trace it back to a specific response you had to it? Like, show us when he said this or did this, this is how it impacted me. Even if it's now, I'm looking back in retrospect. Can you draw a correlation between one or two things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the things that he said and did instilled fear in me. That was my reaction. So I was a freezer. I would just freeze. Like I always said, I felt like I would still myself like a rabbit. Like maybe if I didn't move and I didn't breathe and he would just not see me. But, you know, what one example, and this doesn't even use words. So, you know, people might say that this isn't abuse, but this is the type of stuff he would do. So one day I got home, and this was after I'd filed for divorce. He had put Ring doorbells and video cameras up on my house, so that he could monitor my comings and goings and that of our son. But because he was dangerous and because he had threatened me, you know, people might say that I allowed it, but I didn't want to poke a sleeping bear. So I just said, I don't care. I left them be. But I got home one afternoon, standing in my kitchen, just going through the mail. About 5 minutes later, my ex tears up the driveway, and now I freeze, because that was my instinct. Whenever I felt like threatened, I would freeze, because why was he there and what was he going to do? And the way that he tore into the driveway, something was not going to be good. He burst through the door. We live in a small town in the country. I didn't lock the door. Stupid. But he comes bursting in the door, doesn't say one word to me. The look on his face, though, was one like he wanted to kill me, though. He marched up the stairs to where the master bedroom was, came right back down carrying his handgun, walked out, got in his truck, and left. So is that abuse? No, nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. But did he harm me? Yes, he harmed me because he was instilling fear in me. He wanted to make sure that I knew that he had that gun, and that if I did or said anything else to offend him, and God knows what that would be, that he might use that gun, which he eventually ended up trying to do. But in that instance, I was so fearful, just like when I would say the last 4.5 years of our marriage, he decided he wasn't going to work. You know, well, financial abuse is a whole other thing, but he had this nasty, nasty knife. It just looked awful. And it bothered me that he had it. He would leave it laying next to him on the coffee table when he would watch TV at night. And I always said I felt like that was a shock collar for me, like I was a dog, like it was to keep me within my boundaries, so that I knew that he had it and I knew who was in control. So I didn't open my mouth and I didn't step out of line. I stayed right within the boundaries that he had set for me to act and speak within.
Wow. So, you said that your publisher told you to explore what part did you play in it. I know that's a tough thing to say. I feel a little hesitant, even, you know, as a host asking you interview questions. But
that's okay.
One of the things that came to my mind is when he's doing all this stuff, I'm just trying to understand the psychology around it. And what I'm about to say may be so totally off, and I apologize in
That's
advance
okay.
if it is, but do you think it could have been a part of you that in some weird, strange way liked all the attention he put on you, even though it was crazy attention? Or how would you define it? What were, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, I think it was a trauma bond. Now that I know what a trauma bond is, you know, that you know, the same person who's hurting you is the same person that you turn to for love and safety and all these, you know, things you need to feel secure, because I had nobody else. But I'll be honest with you, I like to be self-aware and open-minded. I will say this in partial agreement with you, because I could see where you're going with that. I definitely know when I was out of that marriage and in a new relationship with a longtime friend, I don't know if my body got, like, the chemicals in my body got used to the stress and the chaos, or maybe I just in my mind got used to the stress because it was familiar and because I had always been told. So now I'm with this.
I just want to say you're expressing it so much better than I did. I didn't use the right words, like it's
Well,
not
no,
an
you expressed
enjoyment.
it how it is. I mean, no, you're not enjoying it, but I mean, certainly I think that, to some extent it's like an addiction,
Yeah,
like your
that's
mind
what
and
I'm
your
trying to
body
say.
maybe together just needed it. Because so when I was out of that and I'm in this new relationship with somebody I'd known a very long time, I'd known his family like 15 years, and I was resistant, but I thought, okay, we've always liked each other, but he's very quiet, very gentle. I mean, complete opposite of my very reactive and hostile ex-husband. But there were times where, I'll be honest, I almost feel like I stirred things up where there was no trouble, just because I didn't feel that he loved me unless we had conflict.
You were kind of
And
attracted to the bad boy.
oh, we
But
all are attracted to the bad boy a little bit, just not
yeah,
that bad.
but you know what? You were set up for that from
I
childhood, though.
was. I was, but it's something, it alerted me. And this is where I know, like, I had been so intent on being alone and taking the time, and many people do after traumatic and abusive marriages or relationships. But I was sort of glad. I mean, I felt bad for, he's now my husband, but I felt bad for him. But at the same time, I was glad that it made me aware of how I was, because
Okay.
then, kind of going back to our healing, if you don't know what the root is, if you don't know what's going on, how are you going to fix it? So it helped me to get to the point where, like, okay, I needed to learn to self-regulate. I needed to learn to calm down, because the rest of the world did not live in this heightened state of fear and anxiety like
Right.
I had for so long. The
Okay.
rest of the world, I hate to call normal, but they lived at a balanced state. And
Mhm.
so I needed to do the work to heal my nervous system, to calm my mind, so that I could relate to others and connect to others on a much better level than what I was trying to do.
Okay. So help me understand this. What was the breaking point, if you will, that caused you to say, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. And not only did you leave, I'm writing a book, I'm telling my story, and now I'm going to try to help other people understand how to take charge of their lives, so to speak, or something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very easy question for me to answer. By the end of 2019, I had been very, very sick for over a year. Just so many. I had probably 24 random symptoms, from blurred vision to numbing hands to I mean, I had digestive issues. There were all kinds of things going on, shortness of breath, dizzy all the time.
All stemming from
Um,
fear, perhaps, or
well, long and short of it, after going to every specialist and every doctor, I was called a hypochondriac, hypersensitive. Some said it was just anxiety. Some tried to give me a pill for my heart issues. I was having arrhythmia and other things and neurological issues. Everybody just wanted to throw a pill at something.
mm,
Mayo Clinic, finally got with them. They did a cortisol test. And for those who don't know what cortisol is, it's a stress hormone. It gets pumped through your body, sort of like adrenaline when you are under extreme stress. Well, Mayo Clinic said, well, we got your results, but we think we compromised the labs because there's no way the results are this high. So we did the test again, and they found out that my cortisol levels were 3 to 4 times higher than the maximum amount they should have been. And this has been going on for decades, from my childhood through my 25-year long relationship with my ex-husband. And it had caused my body to think it had to eradicate something. So my white blood cells had gone so low that I was now autoimmune. And that's why I was having all these random symptoms. I was having autoimmune reactions to all the stress. And then they found out as well that I have this lung syndrome that is actually very common in victims of abuse. And they say this is like having, that's where you hear the scratchiness in my throat. They say it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once. And I did have a lot of fibromyalgia symptoms, but I was deemed to not actually have fibromyalgia. They attribute it to the lung disease. So I'm laying in bed one night. This was the end of 2019, early 2020. I wasn't even in bed, actually. I stayed in my basement because I didn't trust my ex, and things had gotten so bad that he was sending me threatening emails and texts, talking about it would be easier if I was dead, and, that it was just awful. So I'm laying down in the basement one night and I'm just thinking, okay, Dana, I don't want to just die. And this was all that my life was, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something more. And I just felt like I needed to ask myself what it was that I wanted. If anything could change in my life, if anything could be, what did Dana want? And I knew what I wanted very easily. I think we all know offhand, I wanted to travel.
Sorry.
I wasn't able to do that. I wanted to write because I did get a degree in journalism, but I had not pursued a career in writing because my ex didn't want me to do anything that would allow me to have any sense of achievement or success. There were all these other things too. Like, I don't know, I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be married, but I wanted to be with somebody who reciprocated.
Peace and joy.
Right? And that's the thing. We can laugh about it, but these were things that were like wild ideas to me.
Wow.
And so that was my turning point, was when I got sick and I asked myself that simple question of, Dana, what do you want? What do you want? And so I did. I went to an attorney. I got some information because I thought I need to know what this looks like. He did not know that I went to an attorney, but I was left with some homework. I had to get some things in order before I could file. And unfortunately, right after that, COVID, the pandemic struck the world, and we went into a shelter in place. So now I was stuck in the house with this man who had sent me all these messages about wanting me dead, and I'm trying to divorce him, and I'm sick. So I started keeping a record to cover my butt, because I thought if something did happen, I wanted people to know, what was going on. And so I started keeping a record, a notebook of everything that was said or everything that he did, if we had any bad interactions. And then with the time on my hands, I elaborated the stories into what became the book. But the book,
the title,
Gasping for Air. Yeah, it refers to my lung disease, because I think I felt a responsibility. I thought, okay, I have this talent of writing, and I feel responsible for other people that are in similar situations, that they should know that, you might be thinking you're doing the noble thing. You might be staying for the children, or, I know my faith kept me there, quite a bit too. And whatever it is, we all have our reasons, and a multitude of them, but it's not a noble thing to suffer physically, to the point where, even my doctor had said, your body is shutting down, Dana. You have to change your life circumstances. Right. And I think once I gave myself permission to live the full life that I should have thought I deserved, but I didn't realize it until getting sick, that's when that, self-respect came into play, that self-love that we talk about. And I had to, because guess what? Nobody else had loved me, had they? So I had to love me. But guess what happened after I loved me?
Say the full title of the book before we move on.
Sure. It's called Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure the audience got the full title. We're going to be showing your book from time to time, but I just want them to hear you say it as well. Sure. So what are just maybe 3 or so nuggets from the book, or something related to the book, that you can share with us without spoiling it? And these would be maybe a gem, a nugget. If the audience forgets most of the things we've said today, you really want them to hold on to this.
Absolutely. first and foremost, I think that we need to learn to follow our gut. Listen to your gut, because if something doesn't feel right, no matter what justification you can provide or somebody else, if it doesn't feel right to you, it's not okay. So follow your gut. And that's with people, with situations, everything in life. The next thing I would recommend is watch yourself talk. I internalized all the talk around me, the words that were spoken to me and about me for 40 some years. And when I finally got out of that, 4 decades of that, and I am now around people who are speaking positively to me and uplifting me and encouraging me, it made me realize that it's unfortunate that sometimes our biological relations are not those people, but you have to be choosy about who you are surrounding yourself with and how they're affecting you. Because how people talk about you is how you start to talk about yourself and how you start to see yourself. And nobody deserves all that negativity.
And
but the last
deserves to have that kind of power in your life.
Exactly.
Take it back.
Exactly. But that leads to my last little nugget, which is, I spent most of my life looking for love outwardly. And in the end, I found that love was in me all along. It had always been there. It just took something waking me up. Yeah, exactly. And we all have it, and I can't force it out of you or say the thing that's going to make you feel it, but something will happen in your life. Something, everybody has that thing that just makes them realize that epiphany, but we all have it inside of us. And I think once you realize it, you can and will live the most beautiful life. You will feel fulfilled because you'll know that you deserve that joy and that happiness and that love.
That's when you can click your heels and go home.
Yes.
Like Dorothy and
Exactly.
I don't know why the whole time you were explaining that, I'm just seeing her click her heels saying, I wish I was home. I wish I was home. But yeah, it's inside. And our first inclination is to look outside of ourselves. I don't know.
Exactly.
Well, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Now, I would like you to share with my audience any information you want to share about how they might engage with you, have you come as a speaker, buy your book, anything you want to share.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to refer everybody to my website, danasdiaz.com. Links to Facebook and Instagram are on there, and I do post content every day for healing, information, hotlines, resources, but we also have a Friday funny because Lord knows we need to laugh about it all sometimes. Every once in a while we can laugh. I also have podcasts like this one will be on my press room page. I do have a blog on there that I add to once a month. And then there is a contact for email if anyone wants to reach out to me directly for any reason. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I can certainly direct you if you need help finding resources. But I'm always happy to hear from people that, want to share anything or express anything to me.
Well, that's great. And I just want to remind everyone that although you see Dana with a different last name on the screen, it's Dana Diaz. That's how you can find her website and the other things that she's been talking about, and to also find her book on Amazon. So with that, Dana, I am so happy. Thank you for being a guest on my show. This was a wonderful discussion, and I know that my audience are going to get so much out of it.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.